right, so I guess we'll get started. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come here today. And I'm excited to hear the discussion that we're going to have. It's a very relevant topic right now. We use a lot. So big thanks to Christopher for helping me put this together. Couldn't have done it without him. And yeah, that's it. So.
Okay, well, hi and welcome everybody. My name is Christopher Proctor. I'm an associate member of the library faculty at Indiana University Southeast, and I am also a professor of library history for IU Indianapolis. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that new name. I'm going to get there. And actually a fun fact, 17 years ago, January, right? 17 years ago, this library was actually my first paid library job ever. I started here, and then with Nolan, he started a month before me actually. And then I left and he has stayed and has just gone up the ranks. So it's nice to be back. It's been a while. So as part of the panel that we've assembled, and I will let everybody introduce themselves in just a moment. This is an extremely important topic, especially in the field of information and library science as well. Which is something that I research in terms of library history, not AI specifically, but in terms of how information landscapes are changed and they're upset. And it's usually, it starts with a lot of fear, right? Even the novel became this huge epicenter of fear. And then after a while, it starts to become integrated into society as if it were normal and it was never not there. So, it is a very interesting time, especially in libraries. So I'm very glad that we can have this timely discussion because it is impacting everything from higher ed all the way down to mental health and social services. So with that, I am going to have my panelists introduce themselves, and we will start right here with you.
Hi, I'm Joe Shepard. I'm a social worker and a therapist. I've been in the social work field for a few years now. I've worked with kids in foster care. I was the social worker for a public library for about 3 years, and I worked in community behavioral health. I am currently a therapist with LifeSpring.
All right. My name is Michael Wick. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Business at IU Southeast. Before that, I worked at Humana for about 10 years, worked right between finance and IT. And so got to see several different technology changes within the finance organization and was a part of many of those changes.
Yep. My name is Ghanshyam Manwani, and I'm a computer science teacher at IU Southeast in the Department of Computer Science. I teach also in informatics, and my specialty area is computer programming, software engineering. So I'm starting to get into, as the technology develops, I'm starting to get into more and more into, what technology has to offer.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Brewer.
John Steve Brewer. I'm from New Albany, but I work with a firm in Louisville, Kentucky called Clearly Trained. We focus on e-learning, and I do some graphic design and motion graphics for them. I have 33 years worth of graphic design experience, and hopefully can shed some light on imagery and how it's affected.
Nice to know you all, gentlemen. I'm Sridhar Ramachandran. I'm a professor of Informatics at the IU Southeast. I've been there since 2007. Machine learning, AI, those are things that I dwell with, neural networks. So this is a field that I've been involved in a lot. And I also deal with human-computer interaction and human factors engineering. So I'm an engineer at heart, but I'm an informatics professor, which kind of encapsulates all of that. So hopefully we'll have an interesting discussion and you'll be able to ask your questions, and hopefully you'll be able to provide some insights. Can you guys hear me? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Fantastic, thank you. So how the format's going to kind of be at this moment is I've selected at least one question that's sort of a popular question related to the field in AI in each of their areas of their disciplines. And then at the end, we should have time, if you want to be able to ask questions that were, that the answers weren't necessarily covered within within what we have been talking about up here. And also, fun fact, Nolan used AI to generate the title of this program and the content description of the program. I used AI to compile a massive list of questions to ask and then sifted through those. So it did make my life a lot easier. But so I'm actually going to start with Dr. Ramachandran. And because you and I, we have talked quite a bit so far about how AI is being integrated into the educational environment, how it's upsetting the educator or disrupting the educational environment. Disruption in the classroom is not always a bad thing. But there is a lot of concern and fear over the technology. When on January 4th of this year, Elon Musk tweeted, "Goodbye homework," right? Because of ChatGPT. So could you tell us a little bit about how it's being used as a tool to enhance education in the classroom, but how it's also being disruptive, perhaps in a negative way within the classroom, and how we might be able to address that?
Sure enough. The first important thing is the cat is out of the bag. AI is here to stay and to grow. Keeping that in mind, people have talked about how calculators disrupted the math classroom. Teachers were afraid that calculators would oversimplify the process, right? Industrial revolution in itself disrupted the creative process, right? But what we are looking at this point of time, since the cat is out of the bag already, is we are going to be eventually a society that uses AI and doesn't use AI. And Sal, the Khan Academy's chief officer or the founder, mentioned a very important thing. He mentioned that since the AI is already out there, the bad guys will be using it anyways. If we good guys start to use it, we will be ahead of the game, and we will also be in control of the direction that AI takes us. Now, having said that, in the classroom, in the educational arena, this is the time for innovation. This is also an opportunity to look back and see what was not working in our education system. And I see the world through my child's eyes. I see how teachers, the P12 area, the preschool to K, has really accepted AI in a way to supplement the thought process, the design of assignments. So instead of fearing cheating, if we start to look at assignments that cannot be, you cannot cheat. Instead, you will have to really think in terms of making it more personal, making it more creative. Then that's an innovative way of educating. It also makes it more personal. So one of the ways we are looking at, in a dream world, we would like a one-on-one relationship with our students, one teacher per student. But practically, it's not possible because it's expensive. It's also time-consuming, and also is not feasible to hire that many teachers so that you can have a one-on-one. Which is why tutoring exists, right? So we try to provide tutoring. Now, if AI can be your co-teacher, can provide that one-on-one, tuned to where the student is and how to get the student to where they are or where they should be, then you are now seeing teacher burnout is a real thing, right? So now you can see how the teachers can be more innovative. They can start to be the planners of how the curriculum would be, and the AI can help in the implementation. So I'll give you one example of that. In the past, if a student was to given a essay to write or a math problem to solve, the student would solve it, and then the teachers would grade it and then give the feedback, and then that's it, because you have to move on with the curriculum, right? Now the student can ask the AI questions about how do I solve this. So if we have AIs that are censored and are also routed through the school system and logged and observed as to what they're doing, the AI can provide alternate questions to the student to slowly bring them to the understanding. So ask counter questions. So let's say it's the essay about, is AI good or bad? The AI can ask the student counter questions in engaging them. What do you know about AI? and the student can talk to the AI, and then the AI can help the student come to their own version of the answer. So that's where, if the good guys take over, we can facilitate the proper use of AI. Cars are killing machines, but if we have the rules, we have the ways of, we have the driver education program. I think we are at the same juncture at this point, is if we start to innovate in the way we start to think from the student's perspective. Where did the student get lost? The feedback is instant. So you can see that the student gets to know where they made a mistake, and then the same question doesn't repeat. A new question comes in, and then the student can solve it. So that's what I'm seeing at this time with AI.
No, that's excellent. That's excellent. I really like your point about it also allowing professors to develop or a teacher's K through doctoral, right? To develop more one-on-one relationships, kind of forcing us, which I think at an institution like IU Southeast, where we are a teaching focused institution, we get to be able to have those types of relationships.
Yes.
So I taught a class last semester on the history and development of information, especially in the form of the book From the Ancient World to the Modern. And one of the things that we ended up spending, it was quite unpredicted. We spent a week on AI. It was not built into the curriculum, but the students were so fascinated by it. And what I learned from that was, moving forward, anytime for example, I assign a paper, something that I will be doing now is basically doing an oral defense of their paper at the end, which will force me to sit down with them one-on-one, have these conversations, because we had a student try it. He had AI write an essay on how Gutenberg impacted the printing revolution of Europe. But it was amazing because he brought the essay to class, and then he was like, it got this right. It oversimplified this. It generalized this area, but it did this part really well. And I knew right then and there that he got the information that we've been covering all over, right, the entire semester.
Absolutely.
So by having that conversation, I'll be able to allow them to pick it apart if they were to cheat in that sense.
You nailed it, because what we have to start thinking as teachers is, what are we expecting as the outcome of our teaching process? If the outcome is achieved by the students understanding and learning the concepts and being able to creatively and critically analyze it, then the job is done.
Right.
So we have to see where our wins are. And we cannot simply go back to the traditional methods of grading and assign and I would say evaluating, but we will have to be innovative in finding out how exactly the student has consumed and processed the information.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move on to Mr. Steepro here in terms of looking at art, graphic design, and copyright. So one of the most newsworthy elements that many of us have witnessed, because it's so prevalent on social media, is the existence of AI-generated photos, art, and videos, and even voice mimicking. So how do we move forward in an age where identifying deep fakes and misinformation of graphic representation is becoming harder, if not impossible?
I wish I could give you a magic wand to solve this problem, but there really is no one way to determine if something is real or if it was fake. I can only give you advice on things to look for, the clues. The clues in a photograph that's been manipulated are, well, first of all, you could look at the metadata. Each photograph that's taken, usually with a cell phone, usually has data involved, and you can usually find the properties and find that. A lot of that gets stripped away when it's gone through some sort of AI process. So sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. The next stop may be to do, and we do this a lot in our business, is to do a reverse search using Google or something of the like. So at least you can kind of trace where that photo came from. If there's a trail back to the original creator, sometimes they fess up. The original creator says, hey, look what I made in my spare time just for fun. And somebody may have taken it and run with it, to do something nefarious. So things like that. The signs that we look for are obviously photographic based. Are the edges peculiar? If you see something that's been cut out or cut out incorrectly, those are things we look for. AI is not very good at reflections. So if you see a photograph that's taken in a situation where you might have a reflection in a mirror, in a window, if it doesn't look right, it might could be suspect. I was trying to create something, I was tasked with creating an image of a nurse in a hallway for a presentation. And her fingers were all the exact same size. They looked like sausages. And I was like, wow. So things it's not good at are things like that, fingers, details, brand things like a car. It will not take a Ford Mustang and put it in that picture. It's going to create some conglomeration of what it thinks an automobile looks like and sticks it on the curb. So if you see something like, I've never seen that model of car before. I mean, there's little signs like that. Now, that said, there's a flip side to this. If someone's creative, like me, who could put it in Photoshop and eliminate all those clues, well, then it's a whole different ballgame. Of course, we're not talking about AI, but again, if you look at the things I mentioned before, those are usually the things we look for if we're trying to trace the lineage of an image. Now deep fakes, you know, it's chasing your tail right now. I mean, it's sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it isn't. And sometimes you see a photo that's just so well laid out, you got to be suspicious of it. How was this so well taken? You know, it was like the perfect angle. So again, all I can tell you is look for the clues.
It's interesting, yeah. So is there any type of software out there that it can be run through to really sort of detect it all? And I asked that because I read an article recently that, well, I say recently, it's been in the last like 3 months, but I read an article where right after ChatGPT, for example, came out, a student, I think it was a student, a doctoral student, created basically an algorithm that's supposed to be able to detect it, right? And that, you know, anti-plagiarism software was wanting to integrate in all of that, but it actually had a high instance of false positives along with it. So is there anything that you know of right now that is being used? Because I think a lot of people are going to be concerned in like election seasons, right? When photos and videos can be completely fake.
Sure. I don't know of any one tool now, but I'm sure they're out there and they're coming. You know, just as much as you can use it to create, you can use it to analyze. So I think, you know, the time is coming that you'll have more accessible tools like that. I couldn't name one right now, but I'm sure they're coming.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. So actually, my second question for you, I think will be a good segue after we talk to Dr. Rick first. So in terms of economy and business, what have been so far the most positive and most negative? And I do say so far, this is still really new. We're not entirely sure yet, right? So what have been so far the most positive and the most negative impacts we've seen on industry and the economy, especially in terms of integration of AI into business?
Sure. And I'm going to take and adapt that slightly. I'm not going to say that this is absolutely the best thing that's ever happened. But I want to talk about some of the things that it can do and some of the things it can't do. So understand that AI is effectively a computer program. A computer is nothing more than a processing tool for ones and zeros. And so computers are not conscious, they do not have souls, which means they do not have any mind, they do not have a mind, they do not have a will, and they do not have emotions. So if you have any type of job that needs one of those three things, you still need a human. You never have to worry about that job going away. If you have a role that is truly creative and it's not publicly available information, you still need a human. What we've seen is, I would say one of the positives is that there are many roles where there are effectively not enough workers for that position. So we've been hearing about the trucker shortage, that what happens as no one wants to be a truck driver anymore. Well, Tesla's working on developing self-driving semi-trucks. In the field of accounting, there's a shortage of people to fill many of these roles. And so many of the lower order tasks of just simply creating a report, we're using AI for that, or ideally, AI is the last solution that we're looking to. We're looking at other forms of automation if it's possible, because AI tends to become a black box. And if we're making a fundamental business decision on it, we don't want that made from a black box. We want to understand why we're making this decision. And let's see. And so I'll wrap it up by saying that one thing that this has done for industry, especially in the role of, say, an accountant, is that no longer does an accountant have to do all of the repetitive, mundane tasks. They can actually spend much more of their time doing the higher order tasks of truly understanding what the information is telling us, understanding what decisions we need to make as a business moving forward. And so it has freed up a lot of that time.
Okay. So I know, so one of the fears coming out is the elimination of jobs because of that. So are we seeing then that there will be an entire new sector of jobs being able to be created to make up for that dearth that will come that AI can take over?
Yeah, and that's true of any technology. So whenever the automobiles came around, people were worried about what happens to all of the people who are making horseshoes. What happens to all the people who are making wagons? Well, people shift. People are resilient. That that's what we were talking beforehand. Necessity is the mother of all invention. So if a specific job isn't going to be here anymore, then people figure out, what do I need to do in order to make a living? What do I need to do to find a new job? And there are also going to be many opportunities. So one example that I heard of was if you had some type of home surveillance system that you're looking for, if your pet suddenly had a heart attack or something along those lines. I personally would never buy this product because I don't want someone spying on me. But in a hypothetical world, if you had a human that was watching these videos all the time, one, they're going to miss things. Two, it's cost prohibitive. You couldn't be paying someone how much a human would cost to analyze every person's home. But suddenly with AI may not have a 100% success rate of flagging, here's an incident, but they might be able to flag it and then a person can review it, see if it's truly an incident or is it a false positive. So there will be, I expect to see more jobs on the creative side. I also expect to see more jobs that are created because AI created opportunities for them.
Awesome. All right. With that, we're going to move over to Dr. Manwani. So how do you see public policy being influenced by the continued growth of AI, especially at the state, national, and international levels? And how are we going to balance regulation with the continued ability to be able to enhance software?
Yeah, so, as the technology is growing, so has the political system to grow. So we are talking about the public policy, and every country has its own political system, and they have their own needs. They have their own objective, they have their own goals, and there is going to be a competition. It's like Mother Nature, the climate crisis, and it's all there. The AI is going to be all there. Okay, but every country will have to is going to make the policies according to what is best for them. So what has to be done is there has to be an investment in education so that more and more people, more and more training programs are available so that people are aware of what is going on. and not just led to a group of politicians to make decisions for us. So that it has to be from bottom up, you know. Like for example, as we all know that United States and China and Russia, you know, they have their own policies on how the AI, how the technology has to be developed. So the more education, more the country invests in education, the more training programs are there, the more awareness is going to be there. And that's how we will defend our own interests, you know. That. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Last but not least, looking at mental health and social services. So my first question for you are, what do we see as the potential, because it's still new, pros and cons of AI on mental health, but also being integrated into mental health services?
Yeah, so when I think of pros to how AI is used in mental health, I think of accessibility. So I have done telehealth before, and then there are apps. There's Talkspace. I know that's a very popular one. It makes therapy accessible for a lot of people. People live in rural areas. Some people may not be able to drive to get to their therapist. Some people may not be able to walk to get to their therapist. So it really puts therapy in the palm of your hand, which is nice. And companies like Talkspace actually use AI to find you a therapist. So you are talking to a human being on the other side of the screen, but they use algorithms to match you to the therapist based on your preferences. So I think that there are plenty of benefits of using AI within the mental health field. But then there are also downsides. I know that the Polytechnic University of Spain did a study on like 73 different apps, and most of those apps only cater towards certain mental health conditions. So if I do have a mental health condition that's not being met, obviously my needs aren't being met and I'm not getting the treatment that I really should be getting. And then there are also concerns of ethics involved. I know that the American Psychological Association put together a study of different applications, and their self-reports. Is it efficient? Is my data secure? Is my privacy secure? Because some apps, we don't know if they protect your healthcare information. Do they sell it to third parties? So the American Psychological Association actually has on their website, anybody can go to it, what to look for in a mental health care app to make sure that my data and my privacy are protected. And also, are these apps efficient in treating mental health virtually?
So what about using AI in the sense of as a tool for prevention or for flagging in terms of certain mental health crises or anything along that line?
Yeah, there's actually a really interesting program going on right now out of Florida State University. A researcher has teamed with Vanderbilt University, and while the individuals in the study have remained anonymous, they gathered 3,200 people's medical records. And those people are individuals who have attempted suicide. And so they're using these algorithms to code information in a combination of information. And it's projected to be so efficient to be 80 to 90% effective at flagging at like your mental health clinician's office, your doctor's office, if you are at risk for attempting suicide or completing suicide. So there are major strides being made in mental health with the assistance of AI as a preventative measure as well.
Why would you say with the assistance of AI?
Yeah.
Right, it's not going to the point where we're just going to allow the algorithm to determine who is at risk or who's not at risk, right? It's a tool.
Absolutely.
It's another tool. All right, I do have additional, we're doing really well on time actually, so I have additional questions for everybody. This first one though, I'm going to open up to all of my panelists here. As you brought up this idea of security. So in terms of, accountants working with particular clients, in terms of education, when we're looking at grades and FERPA protected information of students in terms of copyright, in terms of data security and privacy, what are we seeing right now as at being the most the most risk? And then how do we continue to develop tools and perhaps use AI against itself in that sense to ensure privacy and data security? And anybody can throw it out.
Well, I get it started. At this time, it's the capitalists who have built it, right? So there are competing AIs. There are several different types of AIs. We just know about ChatGPT, but there are several in the market. There are several in production. What this calls for is more oversight over how the AI systems are accessing information. We had this whole talk about TikTok and the data that it's sharing through its servers in Singapore and Hong Kong and so forth, giving access to other countries. We need to, at least at this point of time, be wary of what we share. So what kind of questions are you asking? How much information are you sharing with the AI in getting what you want? That's important. At least from my friends that I know who work in the industry, the industrialists are more interested in the revenue that they can get by the use of AI. So AI on the workplace is being used extensively. It's been encouraged so that time to market for products can be faster. But then when it comes to personal things like mental health or sharing patient data, I think this is a time of social responsibility. I think this is also an opportunity for our humanness to come back to us. I was having a discussion with my kid about several years ago when Industrial Revolution did hit. Artisans were affected, wagon makers, or probably even precise artists who used to make, very unique artifacts like pottery and so forth. Then came a time when it could be mass produced. There was the trade-off of quality over quantity. And we as human beings didn't have the time because we talked about the fast pace of life. And so I would rather at that point of time, thinking back, buy something that costs $5 and buy 5 of them because I have a kid in the house who's running loose and the vase can be broken and I can replace the vase with another vase that looks exactly like it. Than invest in a $200 vase that is super expensive, which then I would have to put a glass over and, But now is the time when I see if we are wise enough to use AI in the right way, we can get that life back where we can focus on quality. And we can also enjoy the humanness. So whenever I drive to Indianapolis, I drive to Bloomington many times for my IU work. I hardly enjoy the ride because I'm focusing on the road. My kid sometimes accompanies me and they say, did you see the field out there? There were cornfields, did you see the sprinkler system? I was like, no, I go through that road so many times, but I don't enjoy the route because I'm focused on my job, on my task. I see at this point of time, if we are careful with the regulations, if you're careful with how this is developed, the good guys develop it, and there is oversight where with government bodies, keeping the human-centricness to advance humanity, then we have an opportunity to get back our lives. If AI can help us in getting, making more equitable resources available, then it has to move away from the capitalistic model, not towards socialism, not pushing there, but it has to be regulated where democratic countries like us and India, these are big countries that have democracy, to empower the citizens to advance these technologies, rather than letting the capitalists advance it. Otherwise, we'll have a whole new East India Company come back again all over the world. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we did see it's similar to the Industrial Revolution. So I love that you're bringing that up. I mean, we're in a library, so of course I'm gonna talk about it for the moment. But like because of the scientific revolution, the Age of Enlightenment, we started to see within the literary circles a focus on humanism and romanticism come out of that as a counterpoint to the industrialization. But what's interesting is industrialization also gave the free time even to the aristocracy that was already there to be able to Shelley couldn't necessarily write the poems that he did if he had to go to work every day, right? So we do see that backlash, but they're intertwined, they're dependent on one another. I'm going to keep the question going for a second, but I want you to share in terms of data security and privacy, which you told me earlier today, that you had a conversation with your mom, and you said every time you use.
Oh, yeah. Anytime you use, I don't want to say it because it will go off HEY Google, and I ask it a question, I am then engaging with AI. So if you ask Alexa, what are some symptoms of depression? I am then engaging mental health with artificial intelligence. So we use these things every day, and we don't necessarily realize that we're using them every day, because when people say AI, we think of this fear, but we use it all the time. And I would actually like to feed into what you said. You have these people at the top of the chain that are making these decisions with AI, and there's a big fear of bias within algorithms of an AI. Women and people of color are underrepresented in AI. And so when you look at predatory lending, when you look at certain neighborhoods, and when those are programmed into algorithms by big companies, you do have the chance of running the risk of bias. So as social workers, we have a very extensive and robust code of ethics. And I believe that everybody deserves a seat at the table so that we can try to get ahead of these biases and stop them in their tracks.
So I actually have a response to you. I was thinking about how would this impact security? First and foremost, any type of financial information that you're doing, I don't recommend just making that publicly available, right? At the end of the day, if AI was used to break security, that'd be one way. But as long as your information is not publicly available, it's not going to be used in an algorithm. If you're saying, et cetera, what you just said, then some of that information might get picked up. But from a security perspective, that's one thing. Now, what you were talking about, how some of these things have been programmed into AI. First thing to recognize is that AI relies on historic data. And so it's not necessarily that anyone intentionally coded something into an AI. But what I tell my students is that any type of hiring decision, do not use AI. Because first, from a legal perspective, there are laws in place that prevent you from discriminating against people on the basis of national origin, gender, etc. But there are historic biases in the data. You don't have to go back very far and realize that there are very few women in executive leadership positions in a company. So if you are looking at running an AI to find your next best leader, the AI is likely going to recommend a man simply because of that historic bias in the data. It sees that there aren't that many women historically in these roles, therefore I shouldn't recommend a woman. When in reality, it takes us as humans to be able to look past the historic biases and say that I recognize that a woman could do this job just as well as a man could. Therefore, it takes a human to actively say that I'm not going to look at my historic data and I'm going to make a decision.
Well, that's a beautiful point to bring up. It brought back when I was in engineering school, we had a team of 4 of us. And there was one person in our team that we would use in a certain way. We would ask him, what would you do for this? And whatever suggestion he would do, he would give was most probably the most common solution. So we would say, okay, we won't be doing that. So let's focus on what we would be doing. Okay. So he was our way of getting to what we should not be doing or what needs change. Right? I think we can use AI in that way. We can use AI to unearth the existing biases and then investigate. Why did AI recommend a male person for this job? What disqualified women for that particular role? So it can be used as a tool for critically analyzing our existing practices because it's historical data. It has learned from us, and also it has not learned from all of us because the privileged get access to be able to contribute to this data. There are so many people around the world who don't even have a cell phone or access to Alexa or other kind of input devices, and their voices have not been heard by the AI. So one way to look at AI in this perspective, as my team member back then in the engineering school, I hope he doesn't watch the YouTube video, he would know who he is, was our sure shot way of seeing the most common solution and then start innovation from there. Then, okay, so this is out of the way. Now let's start to think in new ways, innovative ways.
That actually goes into another question that I had, which was, what role can educational institutions actually use to prepare people to be, I mean, in library science, we use the term information and digitally literate, right? So looking at information literacy, so allowing us to be able to teach students to be critical of systems that's already in place, how we process information, our own biases, as a powerful tool to be able to question our assumptions. I think that's great. And I do want to ask, well, I mean, you don't have to show your hands, but who has a ChatGPT account? Anybody? Okay. I mean, it's fun, but one of the first things it tells you whenever you're logging in is it says, going back to this idea of data security and privacy, do not provide any personal information, in your questions. And then also, because it learns, whatever that means, it also is now better at being able to ignore and not respond to problematic questions, which is interesting too, because we have seen instances of people using it in isolation cases, right, for conversation. That may be negative towards mental health, but a student trying to practice how to converse in an interview, that may actually be a powerful tool. Same system, different use, different intention. Yeah.
One observation. So misconception is that the computer is actually conscious and it's actually truly learning. In reality, the data is becoming more complete as it gets more data, and as we're effectively saying that, yes, I like this recommendation, no, I did not like this recommendation. The data is becoming more complete, and therefore it looks like it's learning, but in reality, it just has more data.
Absolutely.
In fact, the field of social informatics or social robotics has already seen this. So Japan has aging population, and because of their way of life, there are not many caregivers, and there were these social robots that were assigned to the aging population to converse, to have some kind of a relationship with the aging member, also to provide assistance, like to be able to get up from a chair, the robot would position itself so that they could, and while having a conversation, so they would get the assist. But then, and this, I'm talking about 2 decades ago, this was back in 2008, 2009, 2010. It did not really fly, right? Why? Because one thing we have seen over the years is also social determinism, moving on to social participation. I think our involvement, all of our involvement, is important in driving and rejecting and accepting what is acceptable and not. And that's what has happened over the years. We have seen so many technologies that have been rejected by us, by the society, and so it went out of production. One good idea would be the talk of EVs in California at this point of time, electric vehicles. I was thinking as I was driving from Kokomo, a 3-hour drive, and I was stuck in traffic, and if my car had been an EV, what would I have done? It had run out of juice. Hybrids probably would work. So the solution, why we have not seen EVs, why there is no mandates on that, is for a real good reason. People are talking, they're voicing. And the same thing with AI. We need to voice our concerns, not to AI, but to ourselves, to each other, whoever is involved in the development and advancement of AI.
Right, which I think goes back to what Dr. Manwani was talking about in terms of the creation of social policy, national policy, international policy to inform, right, those types of decisions moving forward and how we're going to be innovative.
Yeah, and whoever is making the policy, it is not just take politicians there, but as Sridhar said, that we all are engaged. What we need to understand is that the AI is artificial intelligence. It is artificial. That's the proper name says. And it relies on the data that the computer has and the program and the code that is written to analyze that data. So it is artificial. What we need to understand is that there is I look upon artificial intelligence as a augmented intelligence. In the same way, the car, the four wheels are augmenting our legs. Okay, how far we can go with our legs and how far we can go with our car. So the artificial intelligence, the augmented intelligence takes us to expand our human intelligence to a greater level. So there is artificial intelligence, there is human intelligence, and other thing that we have to also try to understand is that there is a divine intelligence that also, whoever can call it as a higher power or God or whatever it is, but there is a divine intelligence, because if you observe the tree branch needs the sun. The tree branch doesn't go up like this vertical. It goes to the side because it is covered by the shadow. And then from going this way, and then it goes up. That's how the tree grows, So there is a divine intelligence. So there has to be an integration of human intelligence, which is where is right here. And then there is a divine intelligence, and then there is a AI. So all this has to be integrated, and the fear that we have is, as the panelists have said, is that the jobs, replacement of jobs, the new jobs will be created. The people who used to make the straps, make the bogies for the horses to do. Now they are working in the automotive industry. So there shouldn't be any fear. We should be aware. We should train ourselves, and we are going to be taken care of no matter what.
Thank you.
Let me add two things to this first.
Okay.
First is very important. When we talk about new jobs being created, they're not the same jobs, right? So the threat is real. We can't shy away from the fact when we see in the news, there are so many new jobs created. Why are there still unemployed people? It's because it's not the same job. It's not the same paying jobs. You can take away 2 very good paying jobs and create 10 low paying jobs and claim that you've created more jobs. Okay. The same way, for someone to shift from what their expertise is to pick up some new job is also dehumanizing them. If they were really good at what they were doing, and then you're plucked out and said, now you will be retrained and you will be retooled and you will be put in. I think we should be with the world, and we should call for a world where we are also allowed to explore what other professions we can. There should be a safe transition between these jobs into the new profession, and there should be grace provided by the beneficiaries, in this case, the capitalists, to allow people to find alternate jobs that are connected to their passion. The reason I'm a teacher is because I'm passionate about teaching. And at the end of the day, when I go to sleep, I sit back and I think, how many lives have I touched? And that's what helps me go through the day. I used to work in the industry before, and I hardly met anyone, and I didn't know what I was building was being used for. And that left an empty hole in me. So that's the first thing. The second is the word fear. I don't think we should be afraid of this. Instead, we should be able to be at the forefront and lead this to the direction we want it to go. And I'm not saying that it's sentient and it'll sense our fear, but fear is not going to help us in any way in this situation.
Right.
Because, as I said at the very start, the cat is out of the bag. So we now have to deal with it, but we have to deal with it by leading and taking control of our humanity and looking for things that are deeply personal and then human and keep it alive. And so that's basically what I see as a future for my child growing up, you know. It's something that you have to lead from the front right now.
Thank you. Okay, so we have time for audience participation, if you'd like. Audience questions. We do have a podium at the back. Is that where you want them to go to? I will bring you the microphone. If you want, you can address to a specific panelist based on mental health, right? Social services, business industry, computer science, policy, art, graphic design, and informatics and education, if you would like, or you can make it a general question. So does anybody want to be that? It's like in a classroom, that first student who raises their hand, they're always the bravest, so.
I got a question
Okay,
for the panel, for everybody. Is there anything going on other than this meeting here on the university level across the United States where y'all were meeting and talking about the future of I?
Yes.
Where.
Yes, I talked about coming, yes, I talked about coming from Kokomo. We are having that discussion already. And I think that we didn't completely answer your question about higher ed's role in this. And I think higher education does play a vital role in informing the legislature, in informing and making that connection, being the liaisons between the industrial partners, the government partners who work with the higher ed, and also with the students. You talked about literacy. So I remember an incident, you know, well, I think many of you can share with this. When I was a kid, when there would be, say, a certain scene on a movie or so, I would be sent away from the room. This was the days we had the TV, by like, can you get me some water from the refrigerator? And as I grew, I knew something's wrong. You know, it's like they don't want me to see what's going on TV, right? I would be sometimes, you know, my curfew would be lifted and I could go and play. I got a brother in 9 months, you know, so we make sense of these things, but I think it's about being outright now. We need to let the students know, instead of taking a deficit mindset of ChatGPT is bad or using AI is bad. If they see higher ed folks use it wisely, and also talk about what is not right to do with AI, I think we can lead by example. And that would be for everyone. If we are cautious in our own spaces by saying we should not be asking these questions to the AI, because the implications are these. You know, what if you run for presidency tomorrow? All this is digitized, and they would come back and then would say, well, you spoke this at this point of time, at this place, and that was recorded. So it's a time of social responsibility. So we have to move away from someone's going to look out for us to the point of we need to first look out for ourselves. As they say in the airplane, put on the gas mask first and then help your neighbor, even if it's a kid though. It's tough to do that, but this is the time of social responsibility.
right.
So
And
yes.
yeah, and another thing I can speak to that. So after the tweet that came out, you know, in January, I was hearing very little about ChatGPT. Like a colleague might say like a little thing and then it'd be funny, haha, right? And then I wasn't hearing it a whole lot. So from January, but then in March, one of the things that I do for the campus is I take part in the continuous accreditation process. And so there's a big national conference every year at the end of March, and with something called the Higher Learning Commission. And so just a couple months later, after that tweet, I go to this conference, and then there are, sessions just devoted to ChatGPT. And I'm like, okay, it's time. I got to start paying attention to it now, because my colleagues across the country are talking about this and how it's impacting higher ed. So it's time for me to join in that conversation. And then we see it in libraries. Any new technology that comes out, librarians are just so like, they think this is the death of our profession, right? The audiobook came out, the ebook came out, you know, anything like that. But there are those of us in the profession who are having these conversations. We're using it as a tool. We're looking forward to what we can do with it. But we also have plenty of colleagues who are still of that mindset, like, this is it. There's no more death of books, So I think it's not across the board. You have people opting in, people opting out. And that's why I recommend, we tend to fear a lot of things that we don't have direct experience of. The more we learn about something, the less we fear it. And so that's why, like, I created an account and I just started playing with it. I asked it to write an essay for me on something very esoteric, a very esoteric Buddhist concept. And it did. It was pretty good. But I could also deconstruct what it was. So I can start to see its limitations, and I can also start to see what it does really, really well. So, it's like your computer, right? When you get a new computer, you got to play with it. You're not going to break it. Get out there and try it.
Yeah, I have a story related to this. One of the assignments that I have is having my students essentially apply material about how do we deploy AI in a business. And I noticed that last fall, I was getting these really well-written responses that were just garbage. Like, what is this? At the time, I didn't know about ChatGPT, and then a colleague brought it up to me and said, okay, so in the spring, instead of just having a general question about define the sense analyze react loop, tell me specifically what are the sense analyze react loop for a self-driving car. It's an application that everyone can understand, but now you have to take what we've learned and you need to actually apply it, and you need to answer the question. And I tell my students, quite frankly, if you don't answer my question, you'll get 0 points. I'm going to assume you used AI. So I give them a very specific scenario, and then I require them to actually respond to that. Whether they respond well or not, you'll get a grade. But if you don't respond, you get a 0.
One of the assignments I've given is for them to go generate the answer with AI and find out what are the differences in the answers they get when they ask the AI to rethink and re-answer. So now that not only are they producing it, now they're trying to compare that and analyze it and then bring it back. Right. And then I would add an element of saying, how does this tie to what we discussed 2 weeks ago on this concept? So now they have to even think and keep notes to be able to tie it and make it a continuum.
Right. I think, Jen, was that a hand there?
Sort of. I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but you have been talking in a way as if there is an AI. But I think you said there is not an AI. There are multiple AIs, which you are all using ChatGPT as if it is equivalent to AI. There are multiple companies, I would gather, behind different programs.
Yes.
Like 10, like 50.
There are multitude of them.
How are you picking the one you're picking?
The one we are picking are the ones that are more freely available.
How are you picking them?
We are picking them from what was opened up to us in the academy.
Are there reviews of them? Is there information you can get about them? Do you just like pray and you know that this one is better than the others?
No.
And is there a possibly anyway? You've got these competing companies for a product.
Right.
Other products have had situations where they all disappear and become one monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, or is that, and maybe you think it's a good thing, I would not. How do you prevent that? And how do you know how much, it keeps gathering more information. How do you know where it is on its information gathering level? I don't know what word I want. See, I don't know where I'm going.
No,
I think I fear AI. I think I have concerns about it that are not exactly what you were addressing.
Well, I will say one thing before. Well, before I turn it over to them, it's interesting. So yes, right now I'm talking a lot about ChatGPT because we have been given public access to it. So, but like
So
Joey said,
can the IU system decided, aha, this is the one?
no. The company is allowing. Does anybody know why? What's the disclaimer at the beginning? Why are we all given public access to it? It is currently in what phase?
Data.
It's a research phase. So every question that we ask, it's trying to make it stronger. That's why I think, right? I mean, how you would classify that?
Making more complete data.
It's making more complete data. So we're basically helping this thing get stronger by creating these profiles and using it to ask questions like, what is the North American copper complex, right? And then did it really happen that way? But it's also very wrong. It only collects data up to 2021 now. But so for example, a colleague of mine told me she asked it a question about another colleague of ours, and it told her that colleague was dead. He's not, okay? So there are problems with it, but I would say right now the fad is ChatGPT because we have been given such direct access to see what it can do, but I'll turn it over to them.
Let me ask a question. When I talk of how do you search the internet, what do you use?
My first name?
No, anything. If you want to search the internet, what do you use?
Google, the tool.
Usually I start with Google and I usually find it.
Do you know of any other search engines other than Google? There is DuckDuckGo.
Yahoo searches, Google
There is
searches.
the big search.
Yeah, that's why I went.
Exactly. So the same way, ChatGPT is rising to the top at this time, but there are others there too. So the same way, the reason we are talking about ChatGPT is because that is more in the news at this time, which means it is the one that is collecting more information at this time by making it freely available. When I talk of social media, what comes to mind? Does Facebook come to mind? Instagram come to mind? Twitter come to mind? You've heard of these names, right? Why there are so many more? But eventually, I think your fear is very justified
Concern?
and concerned. Sorry, no, I take it back. I retreat. I retract that. Your concern, which is very good, is that eventually there can be a monopoly, which means others can buy the other AIs out. So, for example, Coke products or Pepsi products, even if you go and buy a Fanta or you buy a Sprite or you buy Dr. Pepper or something else, if you look very carefully, they are probably the same company. There are Nestle owns so many products.
Like the orange.
Exactly.
Coke,
Exactly.
They have so many different beverages.
Exactly. If that happens, then we are looking at a merger of all these collected information from different places. So even could be from your Garmin GPS that you talked to. Even could be from your TomTom GPS or to your car. If it's a car, it's an interactive car. The fear is at this point of time, if we don't step in, if we don't start to intervene, we in the sense public voice, then there can be a monopoly, and the monopoly would have its own set of biases because of what it has learned. And the biases may extend beyond things that we have even thought of. Like there was this fear about medical insurance being, I'll give you one other example before we move into this. There was a time when vending machines were made intelligent and the company was sued for that, is it would measure the temperature outside. And if it's warmer, the price would go up. Is that fair? No, they could do it. So they did it. Eventually, it was pulled down because people objected to it. Didn't buy, first of all, then took them to court. But if it's a giant corporation, if Yahoo, by the way, acquires and buys a lot of other companies, and we may see that happen. So ChatGPT is probably putting itself out as very resourceful. You guys can share information with us. And also on the other side saying, I'm ready to be bought by the highest bidder. Correct? So we have to be careful about what we share. And that's probably the gist of what we're trying to say is we have to be more careful of what we're saying or what we're sharing and what we are using. This will go on YouTube, and YouTube can be mined by AI systems, and AI would know I said this.
Right. So if my panelists will indulge me, one more question. We are over time, so if we can get one, if yes.
Well, I had a comment first off.
Okay.
Find the machine, what the title was made by AI. I think it's just a command from the AI, from our AI.
I'll let you take that up with Nolan.
Yeah, I think I already have.
Okay.
But, you said all the things about, and this is probably a comment that'll lead to another panel discussion maybe. Should all comments about the so-called legitimate uses of AI. What about all the guys out there who are gonna make their own AIs for nefarious?
Yes, they are going to.
Yeah,
They're probably making it right now.
yeah, and I think that was
What do we
touched
do
upon
about
a little, right? That we need to get into the forefront.
A lot of cybersecurity.
Right, absolutely. So again, using it as a tool and harnessing it, but it's just like a car. Somebody can use it
Yeah.
to rob a bank. They can use it to be an ambulance to save a life. What we do with it, the intention is what matters. Yes.
Yeah, and going off of that, the common fear is, are we going to have AI that tries to take over the world? Well, keep in mind that it is just a processing unit for ones and zeros. It doesn't have any concept of what the world is. It doesn't have any concept of what the optimal solution is. But AI at its core is effectively a statistical algorithm that is looking at historic data and then optimizing the solution. That's what it is. As it gets more data, it changes the solution. And so the question of, will we ever have AI that tries to take over the world, is not really the computer you need to be concerned about. It's the people who are trying to use it. Just like you can use a hammer to build a house or kill someone, right? It's a tool. Absolutely.
Exactly.
I'm just kind of a follow-up on that. You know, I like to think about how fast things can progress. And one of the things that we've all experienced in our lifetime, I think most of us, is when the iPhone hit the market and how that has completely changed how we interact with each other and within just maybe 10 years. I mean, it's really changed the world. Just in your all's opinions, I'm assuming we're kind of at this beginning phase of AI. What are the greatest disruptions that you see coming in like the next 10 years from AI? I'll give you an example. Like, I know that there are some restaurants that are now completely run without people. So you order the drive-through and everything is done through AI and everything. So there's no people involved in the restaurant. I wondered if you guys can like sense similar types of changes like that are going to be very disruptive like in the next 10 years.
True.
Yeah.
Healthcare, because healthcare is outrageously expensive.
Yeah.
And if that can be, so my experience with what I've seen healthcare go over the years is that there are so many middle people, the ecosystem has grown so much that the doctor, you getting access to the doctor and the doctor getting what you are paying for is a small portion of where it actually disappears. Okay. So access to healthcare in a secure way for pre-diagnosis and also to be able to re-verify a second opinion to make sure things are going well. Also bringing that down. And by the way, it's already in production. Google Palm LM, if I'm right. Is that right, Durga? Yeah, Palm LM, PALM. Okay. It's already it's a natural language processing machine, which will be integrated with AI soon. And that would give access. So basically I have to think twice before say, if I have a pain, should I go to the emergency room because I need immediate access, or should I take an appointment, which will take 2 months to get to? And if I do go to the emergency, it's going to cost me an arm and an leg, and I may probably just lose an organ in the whole process to pay the bills. Right? So that's definitely that needs disruption. Okay. Easy access to medicine and medical health. Second would be education. Because we have, if we agree or not, the education system is not really working the way it should be working. And being in the education field, I can tell you this is a time for innovation. So it's not something that will take our jobs away, but instead will make our jobs more connected to why we took this job in the first place. To be able to touch lives and make positive changes. But that disruption is coming no matter what. So those two in the next decade, we are seeing that already in motion. They are already making a 2030 vision for that. So.
Okay, John, do you have?
Yeah, along the same lines. I'm sure you're going to see it helping doctors analyze imagery. Specifically, I don't know if you have to go in for some sort of scan. there, it's gonna be not the first line, you know, it's gonna be there to augment the doctor, to help in those kind of, you know, spotting the things that it may have not have, you know, a doctor may not be able to see.
Dr. Manamani, what would you say? Most disruptive element?
Us, you know, if we see the way we react to what is now, this is called artificial intelligence, you know, the way we react is a disruption, because for example, we have what is called that, I mean, you just pick up the food from the drive-through. The drive-through. I tell my wife, you know, I mean, I'm not going to go to drive-through. I'm really going to go in. I mean, deposit a check in the bank or do some bank transaction. I said, I want the human connection. I want to see the sales associate, and I want to say, hello, how are you? Because last time I saw her, she said that she was going to go to Florida. I want to ask her, you know, hey, how was it? You know, so that way it becomes a human interaction, which is important, than going to a window and you know, getting something. So the way we will react to this whole thing, you know, is can be disruptive.
I like that he's talking
Yeah.
about how we can disrupt AI.
Yeah.
So that I like that.
Right. Well, and coming out of COVID, which already created so much isolationism.
Yes.
Right. AI could also be disruptive in the sense that it increases isolationism for
Right.
people who, you know, want to have conversations with a non-human component or
Right.
something like that, or automation of food and whatever. Fantastic.
I mean, I love online education, because when I started, there was no online education. It was just face to face. I love online education. But you know what? I tell my online students that, hey, I'm going to be on campus from this time to this time. Come and see me, and you know, just shake hands or say, we are not going to talk about the course. We just want to know each other, you know.
Yeah.
So it's yes, the technology is there, but the way we will interact with it, it depends upon us.
Thank you. Dr. Rick, what would you say?
I'm actually going to go off of something that you just said. Whenever I started my doctoral program, I recognized that one, I wasn't going to have nearly as much time as I did before. And so I made an intentional choice to close my Facebook account. That way, any type of interaction that I have with friends is going to be in person, and is actually going to be quality time that I spend with people. And so a lot of what happens is going to depend on us and how we react to it. I'm also going to go off of what Sridhar said, because my research is in healthcare, and there's so much need for effective primary care. And the more that AI can be used to augment preventive care and to recognize things at an early stage before they get to be major issues, especially as you're talking about chronic medical conditions, if you can catch a slight fluctuation that may not even get caught in a doctor's office, but because say you take your blood pressure every morning, and suddenly now you have an aberration that you can identify that's something that we need to pay closer attention to. What that will do is that will help to stretch the resources of our primary care physicians much farther than they are right now. Instead of having a checkup, say, every quarter, they can be focused on which patients truly need to have the checkup, and then I'm going to see everyone else once a year, and it'll help preventive medicine quite a bit.
Yeah, and there was that word again, augmented. So if there's something that we all leave here with, switching artificial to augmented, I think is phenomenal. Joe, what would you say? Joseph, what would you say?
You know, it's really difficult for me to say because, as you mentioned earlier, mental health care, it's about the emotion and then translating that emotion to the other person. And, you know, even a virtual therapist may be able to text, you know, I'm sorry that you experienced that, but it's not a sincere emotion. It's not sympathy. It's not empathy. So I don't necessarily think that my field would necessarily be interrupted, but by our practice, but maybe by the way we practice in and of itself, because I know that we were talking about education earlier. The University of Kentucky is actually using virtual reality for their social work students when it comes to like home visits for child welfare. That could lead a social worker into an unsafe environment. And now they're actually learning how they can make sure that the child is safe as well as themselves. So I don't think that there will necessarily be an impact on mental health practice, but the way we practice.
So what I loved was the question was about disruption, but in each of these, the disruption was actually a potential. And that's what I really liked about it. Remember, disruption is not always a bad thing. So we are over time. If you all would join me in thanking our panelists for volunteering their time here today, I do greatly appreciate all of you taking the time to share with us. And if you have any additional questions, if anybody sticks around, feel free to come up to us, say hi. And I like to, any public library program that we partner with the IU Southeast Library, I do like to remind everybody, you all can be patrons at the IU Southeast Library, whether you live in Southern Indiana, anywhere in Indiana, or one of our service regions in Kentucky. You have every right and to be a patron for us. So please come in, come see us. It's free parking all over campus. We can get you a card. We can get you access to our databases, to our peer-reviewed research. We can continue this conversation. Hopefully this is also building the bridges between IU Southeast as an institution of higher learning in our community and our community members, so that we see we're all in this together and we really are stronger by working together. So again, thank you all for coming. Thank you all very much. And thank you, Nolan, for having us here.
Thank you.